Hi everyone, I'm Chris Mars and welcome to Chris Mars Music. Today I've got another great interview with an artist called Jesse Wilson, who is a UK-based composer, very much into his 80s synth pop type style of music, and we're talking about vintage synthesizers, recording techniques, old and new, and lots of other stuff in between. So please tune in and enjoy this great interview with Jesse Wilson. Hello. Okay, let's do this properly, right. Jesse Wilson interview, take one.
Yay! Action!
Jesse Wilson, hello and welcome to me. Welcome to my channel.
Chris Mars.
How are you?
Speak with you?
Very nice of you to join me here.
Thank you for having me.
Very nice to see you. So, without any further ado, tell us all about it. Where did you start your musical career?
Oh my God, where do I start? How long have you got?
Yeah, where did you start?
Well, I started playing the kazoo. Well, no, my history, in a nutshell, I at a very early age was really interested in drums, and I was banging. Do you remember those Marvel powdered milk tubs?
I think so.
70s. And they had.
Oh, I'm not that old.
Neither am I.
I believe you. I'll take your word for it.
1999, yeah. But they had these plastic tops, and I used to have chopsticks, and we didn't chuck them out for some reason, and they had a really good bounce, and that was my sort of first ever musical thing I can remember doing. And then at 7 years old, my mum and dad bought me a real miniature drum kit. It wasn't one of these sort of cheap sort of miniature drum kits. It was literally a proper kit with the lugs and everything. 10-inch snare drum, bass drum was about 15 inches or something. I mean, it was tiny, but it was brilliant. It was the real thing. And then my dad was a guitarist, and he's played with John Martin in clubs in Hull, and some very interesting musical connections. But he had guitars always around the house. And then he bought a real piano, and when I used to come home from school, I just used to sort of play around with these things. And then over time, I sort of developed sort of a natural skill. I had some proper musical lessons, but that never worked out. I was just too much interested in doing my own thing. And then my stepmom, she bought me a Porter Studio 244 TIAC, and I bought a Roland Juno 60, and I started, kind of just putting things together, laying tracks up on each other, and I guess the music producer in me was born at that time, and then I played in various different bands, coming out of school and all that kind of thing. And then I got really interested in producing stuff, and then bought an Atari ST with Cubase,
1040, I've got one of those up in the attic.
Yeah.
with Notator or Creator.
Yeah, exactly.
I've still got it.
And I remember, in the studios trying to sync these things with reel-to-reels. The nightmares, when they used to go out and
the old Simpty tracks.
Simpty, yeah, God, good old Simpty, and that sort of. It was almost like the precursor, if you could hear it audibly, to early internet lines when it had this high pitch sort of sound. Where did it go from there? Eventually, we had a recording studio down near where I lived, believe it or not, and I got some work experience in there. And through the years, I just kind of developed bits and bobs, and then ended up getting offered a record deal for like an album. And the deal was that they had another artist that bizarrely enough couldn't fit their schedules. As a record label based in Southeast London in the early 90s. And they said, look, would you like to record an album? The only thing is you need to do it you need to record the album in a week, because we've got this slot in our studio, and that's in a month's time.
Blimey.
So I literally had a month to compose an album and then go in there and record it. And what we would do is I stayed over at a friend's house in London somewhere. I can't remember where it was. North. Was it north? Somewhere north. And I had to go down by train. We'd literally put all the tracks down for one track, as it were, lay everything down. And then the next day would come in, mix that in the morning, do the next track in the afternoon. The next day, mix that in the morning. And we literally looped around. I mean, obviously, we had to sort of do a couple of them closer together. But within a week, we actually had a whole album done. And we got vocalists and everything. And that project was called Ultra Vibe. And I had another project that was called Sugar Train at the similar time. And this was sort of a mixture of neo soul, drum and bass, trip hop. You know, it was kind of those sort of early to mid 90s. And, you know, there were all these new styles that were sort of coming out. And then ever since then, I've just been doing my own projects. One of the major projects was called Positive Flow. I worked with Donna Gardier, Omar, various different people on that. I had some decent US releases. All the way coming around to what I'm doing now, which is La Avenue, which is an 80s inspired project similar to the likes of the Midnight, FM 84, Mitch Murder. Not a lot of people have necessarily heard of those names, but within this musical genre or scene, they're like the titans, if you like.
I have been listening to your L'Avenue material, and it's excellent. It's very, very good indeed.
Thank you very much.
Very inspiring.
Cheers.
Love listening to stuff like that. It's what were your musical influences at the beginning?
In the very beginning, good grief.
Was it what your parents were listening to at the time?
Yeah. I would say some of the biggest influences were probably Steely Dan, ABBA. God, trying to think back to that time period. That's really fascinating. My dad, I mean, was a massive Dylan fan, Beatles, Traffic, all kind of sorts. But then, you know, I moved into the 80s, so it became the whole sort of new romantics scene, you know, early Duran Duran, Simple Minds, classics nouveau, you name it, Flock of Seagulls. And you mentioned them earlier, Chris.
Yeah, I had a little time with them on tour. Yeah, back in '86.
Very impressed.
Yeah,
very impressed.
That was early days. Yeah, I was only 21 when I joined them.
Yeah.
So, as a keyboard player at the time, it was fantastic. Talking of classics in your row, the guitarist that joined us on tour was Gary Steadman, who I only spoke to just the other day. Spoke to him a couple of days ago, and he was on tour with us. He was the guitarist, and I was the keyboard player for the expanded band at the time that they wanted to do. So that was great. Fantastic guitarist.
Those the early, 80, 81, 82 was an incredibly, creative time. I mean, I was a huge Japan fan, and I don't know if you remember Wang Chung.
Oh, absolutely.
Wang Chung. They released a whole album that, I remember seeing them on the old Grey Whistle Test, and it's like, God, who are these guys? And Gary Newman and just everything that was coming out around that time, early New Order, and when synths and electronic music was really coming into the fore, even early Spandau, Muscle Bound and all this kind of stuff. It was like, whoa, what is happening here? There's like this totally amazing time. I feel really quite honored to have been able to, been around and enjoy it all, actually.
Yeah, looking back at it now, it seems like a dream sometimes because, we had, I think you and I have had similar sort of influences in those times. And it's amazing looking back to see where meeting such and such a person would lead to another opening in this band or that band or this production or that production. And in fact, a lot of those names that you mentioned were people that I'd come across during that time.
Wow.
And it's amazing to look back on that. And it was a very fertile time for working, especially in the 80s.
Yeah.
And there was a very strong club scene, which we all used to go out to. And that's where you'd meet everyone in the clubs, in the nightclubs. I mean, I used to play and sing in the clubs then a lot. So I was
Wow.
right in the heart of it. And that's where I met all these people. That's the only way you can
Wow.
meet people, you know. But yeah, so from your 80s influence, as we touched on it a few minutes ago,
Yeah.
has led you to create L'Avenue, this project that you're working on.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, actually, it almost came about completely accidentally. In fact, at the time, it must have been maybe about 3 years ago now. I actually had this Positive Flow project, which is like R&B, neo soul, hip hop, jazz, all those kind of influences. And then I had a progressive house project called Ocean Sky, which was really kind of out there,
Yeah.
atmospherics, but with really good high quality sort of house beats and everything. And it was that actually led me into this synth wave genre, because I'd released a track on a US stroke Russian label called Silk Music, who were pretty big at the time. And I was on their mailing list, and I got sent this information on a remix album by a group called The Midnight, and I'd never heard of them before. And I listened to some of it, and I thought, this is actually pretty good. This is really good. Wow, these songs are great. And I thought, I want to hear what the source material of these remixes were, because the remixes were all house, progressive house productions. And so I went and listened to this album called Endless Summer by The Midnight. And it was like, what? It was like the best of the 80s aesthetic musically, but with today's contemporary cutting edge music production, and brilliant songs. And the first thing that happened was I was just so impressed with that production, and they were using a lot of saxophone, big time. And I thought, that is really bold for this day and age. I mean, they were going full on 80s. And I think even Tim Smith, the producer, had made a statement at some time, was, we're going full on 80s. We don't care whether you love it or hate it. This is just how it's going to be. And similarly to what, no doubt you will have a fond memory of this, where you'd buy an LP, you'd take it home, and you'd listen to nothing but that LP for the next 2 or 3 weeks.
Completely, yeah.
Until you'd worn it out and copied it to cassette, and then listened to that in your Walkman. And I couldn't do anything but listen to this album. And I literally, for the next 2 or 3 weeks, it was just on constant rotation. I hadn't done that for a long time.
What was it called again, the album?
Endless Summer by The Midnight. Yeah.
Right.
And it's just absolutely top quality. It kind of it rekindled all these wonderful memories from the 80s, the best of the 80s and everything else. And then I kind of looked a bit more into who they were and what was this scene called synthwave, and discovered that there's this literally whole bustling group of people that are into this revival of the 80s aesthetic sound. It's very much more on the electronic kind of angle, though. It's kind of like, Harold Faltermeyer's, score to Beverly Hills Cop.
Yeah.
It's all that kind of vibe. And I just fell in love with it. And having sort of lived through that experience, and what was great about the synthwave scene, it's not just music. It's about the visual aesthetics, that, there are all these references to movies and the artwork, and it's the whole package, And I discovered some other really great guys. There's a guy which I mentioned earlier called Mitch Murder, and he's just uber talented. And there's another act called FM84 Duet. I mean, there's lots of them, and so I just kind of found myself, I've got to do this. I've got to start a project, and L'Avenue was born. And I just thought, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just make sure that the sound quality is going to be as top dollar as it possibly can. There's lots of people doing this music. There's kids just knocking stuff out on their laptops, all the way through to, people like the Midnight, who are real pros and have been producing lots of big artists prior to this. So that was always my concept, was that the music's got to be absolutely the highest bar, the artwork's got to be the highest bar, the whole lot. And I wanted to do it without a label this time as well. I thought I really want to do the art, because in my day job, I'm a graphic designer. I've got my own little firm.
Right.
So I've got a lot of skill set in that area. I've also worked in marketing for a lot of other people. I've had my own label with another friend of mine many years ago. So I've got a lot of knowledge and experience with how to put all of this stuff together. Also, and with the advent of social media and, web applications like Bandcamp, you can pretty much do it all yourself. You can sell your own stuff, and you don't have to cut into, the label costs as well. You're not going to end up just with your 15% if you break even.
Yeah.
After 2 years,
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely in our hands now as musicians. We have the ace in our hands. It's just learning how to use it and how to work it. Which can be a bit of a minefield, I find. It's a learning curve. It's a necessary learning curve that we all have to go through.
I think it took me probably about 12 months to 18 months to kind of set the whole project up and work out how it was going to work and how I was going to use this, and actually research, looking what these other guys were doing. And what I discovered, with a lot of these, they're all completely independent artists. I mean, some of them have signed on to bigger labels now, but prior to that, they were selling entirely their own merchandise, setting up entirely their own gigs. There were these almost totally self-contained units with no management, no nothing. And making a hell of a success of it. And that was really kind of like, wow. I'd always been with labels pretty much. And that can be a blessing and a curse at the same time. But, I kind of got to an age where I really wanted full creative control over everything for a change.
Well, talking of creative control, give us a little insight as to how and what you're using to write and record these particular tracks you're doing at the moment. So what kind of technology are you using? Plugins, keyboards, wise?
I'm using Cubase Pro, and I've I've always used Cubase ever since I had it on the old Atari ST. Yes. And it was the main notator competitor, wasn't it? It was you're either on Cubase or you were on Notator.
Yeah.
I remember looking, and Notator morphed into
Logic.
Logic, of course. Yeah.
That's what I use at the moment. Yeah.
Oh, you use Logic? Yeah. I mean, I've teetered around a little bit with that, but it's kind of one of those things, isn't it? When I just know Cubase inside and out.
They all pretty much do the same thing, but it's different layout, isn't it? It's oranges and lemons, I guess, isn't it? But it's they're both really good.
Yeah, I mean, no doubt, probably either one of them maybe does something a little bit better than the other, but generally,
as long as you write the music and can record it, that's the main.
Yeah.
So which and of course plugins are universal with they're cross-platform. So what are your favourite plugins to use?
That's a really good question, and just a slight backstory on this too, as well as sort of rediscovering, that I could sort of go back to my early teenage years and recreate this whole 80s thing. What I found out along this journey was all these glorious old synths back in the day had been reincarnated into these beautiful digital and it was like,
it's amazing.
And I discovered Roland Cloud. Do you have Roland Cloud?
No, I was thinking of signing up to it, but
it was. I was like a kid in a candy.
I was a real Roland user a lot. I was using Roland a lot.
Yeah.
At the beginning with the Juno 60 and stuff.
Roland
like that.
Cloud, they've got obviously sort of a lot of some of their newer synths and stuff like that, but they've got this what they call the Legendary series.
Right.
And I mean, they've got, JX8P, Juno 106, JX3P, Roland D50, JD800. You just name it, all in pristine digital form.
There's
with all the original patches.
Yeah, I know. There's one pack, the JX3P. I used to use one at the band I used to play in back in the early 80s. There's one sound that I'll never forget. It always reminds. Well, it is the JX3P.
Yeah.
It was the sound that you hear it in the song "Automatic" by.
Oh yeah.
The girl band. What they called now? Not Pointer Sisters. Was it?
Pointer Sisters.
Pointer Sisters. Yeah. There's this. It's. That sound, I'm sure that's a JX3P because I used to use that sound all the time for soloing, and it's just that sort of fuzzy, buzzy lead solo sound, which is so Roland in those days. They're amazing.
Probably my number, it's very difficult, isn't it, in our line of work to choose a top 10, based on how much music is out there. Yeah. Very, very difficult. Yeah, and given a few decades of incredible music, but probably up there for me at the number one spot is the 12-inch mix of "Slave to the Rhythm" by Grace Jones.
That's amazing,
produced
isn't it?
By Trevor Horn.
My favourite. Yeah, so good. It's so good.
So good. Even today, it is still so good. But there's amazing on the 12-inch mix. There's a little break right in the middle, and there's this one patch, and it's from the JX3P, and it's JX8P. It's called Voices, and hearing that patch again was like, oh my God. And that has just been so much fun going through, all these old synths and discovering. And my other favorite patch is on the D50. It's called Soundtrack. And funnily enough, Ricky, one of the things Ricky Wilde and I were discussing, when we first kind of hooked up, because he'd been given my first EP by a mutual friend, Lee Bennett, who's at the Supergroup too.
Oh yeah.
Great guy. And on that first EP, there's one particular track. It's called Lipstick and Sushi. And I've used this D50 soundtrack patch. And that was Ricky's favorite track off the EP, and kind of what got him to get in touch with me. And we were talking about, oh my God, that D50 patch. It's just such a classic sound, but it still sounds so good today. And a lot of the Avenue stuff, I'm just using it. But, there's not many tracks that don't end up having it somewhere.
Yeah, that D50 was such a good keyboard when it came out. I used to have the D550, the right mount unit.
Oh, yeah.
And there was a sound on there, the soundtracks, I do remember. And there was also another sound which I loved. It was called Rubicon. I don't know if you remember that one.
I don't.
It's just a nice ethereal sound. It's so beautiful. It was.
I'm gonna
check that out.
We've had a chat. I'll be going to check that out.
They're all amazing. Unfortunately, I sold most of my hardware keyboards because I went almost virtually virtual.
Yeah.
Got so into plugins. There are so many companies making incredible plugins these days. You've just got to pick what suits the project.
Yes. Yeah, definitely.
But there are some beauties out there.
There really are. Yeah, I mean, to answer your question, that was sort of my backstory. But yeah, some of a Juno of some form. I mean, I have digital versions of Juno 60s. The 106. I mean, it's just, if you need warm, lush sort of string-like pads, it's just the go-to. If whenever I feel inspired to make something, I normally can pull that up and start playing around with some chords. And my other absolute favorite is UHE's Diva.
Oh, I recently downloaded that one actually.
It is just outrageous.
It's amazing,
because it covers so many bases.
It's quite retro, actually, isn't it? It's quite retro.
It is, yeah. And it's got incredible bass sounds, can do incredible pad sounds, and then your leads, and then it does a load of really weird stuff at the same time. Yeah. And that is so useful for which virtually anything that you need, that is a real go-to. Outside of that, the main bit of kit I use is, do you know UVI? They're a French company.
I have UVI. I have the Melotrons, the organs, and the special effects. They're really, really good. All UVI, fantastic company.
And they've got this synth anthology.
Yes.
Synth Anthology 3 they've got now, but I think I've got 2 where they've literally just sampled just about everything.
They're really, really good. They're fantastic. The French are excellent at stuff like that, yeah.
There's just like this. I mean, I could be putting out music until I was like 90 odd, and I'd still probably have spare patches that I
yeah. There are so many sounds there, though, but they're all, the great thing about it is that they're so inspirational. You play them for a few minutes or a few seconds, and then you think, "Oh, that's a nice chord."
You're inspired.
Record that, and before you know it, you've gone right off track, and you've written half an album within 20 minutes.
Absolutely,
they are. Absolutely. The sounds are amazing.
Yeah, What are your go-tos?
I use a lot of Spectrasonics. So Omnisphere. Yeah, definitely Omnisphere. The full whack Omnisphere. A little bit of Stylus RMX for some rhythms and stuff.
That's the bass unit, is that right?
No, that's Trillion. Trillion's the bass one. That's really good. I use that for bass. Oh, it's superb.
Yeah.
You have any bass you want there. Upright, electric,
fantastic.
Chapman stick, whatever you want, it's there. I've started using Arturia quite a lot now.
Yeah, I've got some of their stuff.
If you're into your 80s or even 70s, they've got some amazing packs out there.
Some great stuff.
Great packs you can download. They've got some great retro stuff like Pink Floyd. I don't know if you've seen the Pink Floyd pack that you can download. It's got sounds from Wish You Were Here and Dark Side of the Moon, and and Genesis.
Wow.
They're really, really good. Got the old Genesis organs and stuff. It's my favourite band, so I can talk about them forever.
Funny you should mention the Chapman stick.
Nick Beggs.
Nick Beggs.
Yeah.
And
he's a genius.
Funny enough. Sorry?
He's a genius on the Chapman stick.
He's absolute genius. And do you remember Big Bubbles, No Troubles?
No.
He after Kajagoogoo, for one of his projects.
It sounds like a lap dancer's name, by the way. Hello, my name is Big Bubbles, No Troubles.
Now. Going in dangerous territory now. Big Bubbles, No Troubles. But he teamed up with 2 guys. I can't remember their first names, but they called their project Ellis, Beggs and Howard.
Of course, yes, I remember that.
A player and a singer.
They were great.
And they did an album with Island or someone like that. And apparently this track came together at the end, which was called Big Bubbles, No Troubles. And it had this unbelievable funky bass line that Nick had done on the Chapman stick. I mean, I played that track, I can't, to death. And, that was really what turned me on to Chapman stick. Wow. How'd you get that sound out of that thing? It's just incredible. Yeah. But he is a genius, even to this day. I mean, he still gets rated as like one of the #1 bass players around today.
He's a phenomenal player, actually. I've seen him a few times with Steve Hackett when he was playing with him. Incredible concert as well. And he's Nick's a lovely guy and superb musician, excellent musician. Love to get him to come and do an interview, actually.
You should, absolutely. It'd be incredible.
Don't prize him away from his Chapman stick.
Yeah.
So, going on from Loving You, we shall put the links down below, and people will be able to listen to your material to their heart's content. After you've finished, or is it a project that you're going to finish and then move on to something else, or is it going to be something that you're going to continue to do?
You know what? It's really interesting because this Positive Flow project that I've got came out through a German record label called Tokyo Dawn, and they've been constantly on my case for a new album.
Right.
And I've literally written one, but this love affair that I have with La Avenue is kind of like, I mean, even my wife's getting jealous.
Right.
I think because truth be told, I've got so much material. I'm just finishing a follow-up EP to the first EP that I did. And then I've got another EP ready to go in July. And I'm already got another EP ready for October. And then I've got another two EPs. These are 6-track EPs, not like 3 or 4, 6-track EPs. And then I've literally got a whole album's worth of material. And everything up to this point actually has been instrumental in this project, purely because it just allowed me to sort of not have any interference with anyone. Could just literally, it's the laptop and me, if you like, you know. But I definitely want to move into vocal territory, and, you know, been working roughly, you know, with a couple of people, just sort of working out, you know, what we could do in future. So, I mean, I've got probably another year and a half's worth of like Avenue releases minimum that I'm working. I've even got album artwork, everything on the go. It's kind of like, you know, when something is just such a natural passion.
Yes.
You just love it. It's what you get up for in the morning.
Yeah, and you never get bored of it either.
Yeah, and to be honest, I mean, I did wonder when I started this project, and I even remember talking to my old man about it, and I said, Dad, what am I doing starting this new retro 80s project? That's a bit niche, isn't it? I mean, it's not like I'm going to be buying a yacht off this or anything. Excuse me. But what do you do if something you just love doing, and other people really love it too? So I don't see that I'm ever going to be stopping doing it, because what's interesting about this project, as a quicker aside, is that it's contemporary at the same time as being retro. You know, it's morphing these two things. So at any point, if the 80s thing just went south, I could probably morph it into something else pretty rapido, you know.
But there is a huge market for that kind of music. There is and always will be. But it is excellent. Very, very good stuff.
Yeah.
I would say just continue doing it. If it makes you happy, just keep doing it.
Totally.
You know, because if you like it, other people are going to like it.
Exactly. And I think that as soon as you start not enjoying something, and it becomes, you know, you've got some alternative purpose, it's to make money, or you feel like you're supposed to do it out of duty to the fans or something like that, but you're not necessarily truly inspired to do it, then I think it becomes problematic. But if the, you know, is still such a sort of a well of music still to be made. And I think there's a vast audience out there as well, because, you know, the 80s sort of has almost two markets. It has all the people that lived through it, that are loving listening to new versions of things that they really liked. And then there's all these new kids who are just like, who never lived through it, that are like, oh God, we love all that kind of stuff. Back to the Future and Beverly Hills Cop, and oh yeah, man, that was brilliant. And Sylvester Stallone movies and all this kind of stuff. And they pieced the whole thing together, because it was almost like a lifestyle, you know, wasn't it? You had your BMX.
Yeah,
you know,
and the clothes and the whole style of it. It was definitely
cars,
a very
Lamborghini Countachs, and, you know,
it was a neon time. It's like living in a neon filament bulb.
Yeah, exactly. and I even, funnily enough, for research, of course, I bought the whole Miami Vice box set. You know, all 9 seasons of it. Because when I was younger, I never saw it. It was on too late. It was too violent, or what was considered too violent at that time.
Yeah.
And actually watching it now, I'm like, God, it's a work of art. The music, you know, there's a scene in the first season where, you know, they're driving in it's a Daytona that they've got, and they're driving along the beach at night. And the music that they used is In the Air Tonight by Phil Collins.
Yes.
And it's this marriage of that music and the car and the palm trees and these two cool dudes off to some, nails some baddies.
Yeah, actually, you just reminded me of a little story I'm going to tell you regarding Phil Collins. When the first time I met him was when I was performing in Stringfellows back in the early 80s.
Kidding?
Yeah,
Wow.
it's quite a famous story at the time. He tapped me on the shoulder when I was playing one of his songs, and he said, "Sounds like Phil Collins to me." And I turned around, and there he was with Robert Plant and
No
Mike Rutherford,
way.
and their manager. And
That's
then
incredible.
well, I remember I was such a big fan in those days, and I was very, very young, but they were a huge influence on my musical career.
Yeah.
And cut a long story short, I managed to blag my way down to their studio. They gave me the number, and I phoned them up and
Oh
said,
my
come down and see
God.
us. So they invited me down there, and there I was waiting for. I was one of the first there, and the roadies let me in, and Phil Collins turns up, and he starts cooking us breakfast. And then the other guys came in. Mike Rutherford came in, and
Was it any good?
Hugh Padgett. Breakfast was great, but what was even better, he just flew back from America, from Los Angeles, filming his part in Miami Vice,
You're kidding.
and
Oh
and
my
he had the
God.
tape, the VHS with the time code on it. He says, "I've just got back from LA, whatever, and here's the tape." We were sitting there
That's
watching
incredible.
it. Hadn't even been put on TV yet.
That
So
is
we watched the
incredible.
whole episode. It was incredible. There I was at 20 years old with my
And
heroes.
had you seen Miami Vice before that? Or
Oh
was
yeah,
this?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Before,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
But when you're so young, like,
Yeah, that must have been
you
utterly
know,
incredible.
yeah,
Utterly
19,
incredible.
20, it was, and of course a year later I ended up going on tour with Flock of Seagulls. So it was all quite a surreal time
All
actually
happening.
in my
Yeah,
life. Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
but those moments,
Special moments.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah, because you end up working with these people in later life, and you come across them, and sometimes you're in their band, or not myself, but other people who I know who work with them for a long time, and before you know it, your heroes are your workmates, and
That's a pretty.
that's a fascinating thing about the music industry is you never know
Yeah,
who you're going to meet, and
yeah,
or who's going to
yeah,
inspire you.
yeah,
So, and going back to what you were saying about that sort of Miami Vice sound, the
yeah,
theme
yeah,
tunes, etc., etc. What with the music that you're writing currently with La Avenue, it's so good, and you're doing it because you want to do it, because you
yeah,
feel that you have to do it, and I think
yeah.
that's the duty of a musician,
Right,
is you
right.
feel that you have to write a certain type of music because you want to write it, you love writing it,
Yeah,
get it out there. You're not doing it for anyone else, you're doing it for yourself, and because you're
yeah,
doing it for yourself, other people will like it.
yeah,
I think
yeah,
that's so
yeah, yeah.
important
Yeah,
because
I agree.
I feel that a lot of musicians are afraid of putting out certain types of music because they're afraid of the rejection that they're going to get,
Right.
because they're not quite sure
Yes.
if people are going to. And I think
Big
you
it or
should put
not.
that behind you, put it out there,
Yeah, I agree.
as long as it's best quality
Yeah,
recording
exactly.
and the graphics,
Exactly.
as you say,
I
put it out
totally
there.
agree with that. I
And then draw a
totally
line
agree with that.
underneath it and move on to the next
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah, I
Otherwise,
mean,
it'll be stuck in your brain and you can't get it out.
yeah, you can't.
That's
Yeah, I mean,
horrible.
it is, and you do get those sort of you get stuck on those unfinished projects, don't you? And
Yeah,
it's kind of like you have, yeah, it is a duty to wrap it up, finish it, and get it out there. And actually, what's really quite interesting, there are a couple of things that I put out that I thought were really sort of love letters to my own your own passion, and you thought this is really kind of like, is anyone really gonna else like this? But you're kind of like, well, I can put it out. If a couple of people like it, fantastic. But then, funnily enough, and those were the things that I felt most passionate about.
yeah,
Funnily enough, those things were what got the biggest response, and
right.
not things that I was sort of thought were a bit more commercially acceptable, if you like. But the things I was really passionate about, fascinating.
That,
That was quite, and what? Oh, okay, that was
yeah,
unexpected.
yeah. I'm going through a kind of a similar phase at the moment as you are with regards to you wanting to do your 80s stint of material, which you're doing so well. I always wanted to write sort of ambient,
Wow.
Brian Eno-esque,
Oh, nice.
really, really
Yeah.
long bits of music.
Yeah.
For many,
Love
many years,
that.
I've always been inspired by it,
Yeah.
very electronic, very early Alan Parsons kind of
Yeah.
stuff, you know.
Love it.
And so I've started releasing a lot of this material now.
Wow.
Bearing in mind that a few years ago I released an album which is completely different. It's totally commercial
Yeah.
with, you know, I'm singing on it, and it's the full band, organs,
Yeah.
drums, the whole lot,
Yeah.
guitars, you know,
Yeah.
rock.
Yeah.
Whereas the stuff I've been doing very recently is very, very ethereal, and I
Oh,
absolutely
yeah.
love it. But in the middle of doing that, I had an inspiration to write a song which came to me within a few minutes, which is like a throwback to Nat King Cole.
Oh,
So,
wow.
so I recorded that and released it sort of
Wow.
whilst in the middle of writing this ambient music. So it's funny how you can get these bursts of inspiration to write different types. And I think, I don't know, I'll ask you the question. Do you think it's best to have them, would you say releasing them in any order is okay? Or do you think you should release them as a package and then move on to the next? Because at the moment, I'm putting out so much material.
Yeah.
I know I should stop and say, right, this is this album, this is that album, but I
Yeah.
think once you're on a flow, you can't
Yeah.
stop.
And I don't think you should actually. And I think it is a really tricky question that I think a lot of artists have. And I think the beauty of it is today that if you can, build up your own kind of audience or public, and that
Mm.
they do genuinely really like what you are putting out. I mean, I almost get comments now, when's your next record? When's your next record? I'm dying for the next one. And I'm like, well, I just put an album out. What are you talking about? They almost can't get enough.
Mm.
And I think that if people do genuinely really like what you're doing, then they're always just going to love it.
Yeah.
And I think, as artists, it's a very natural impetus to like, I want to finish that, put that out, finish that, put that out. And I think, labels, etc. It can be, well, we've got to do it in a marketing plan, and they've got other artists and other groups. But that's the beauty of things like Bandcamp, SoundCloud, and all these online platforms, is that you can put your own material out and build your own audience. I think as long as you feel happy with the material, that putting it out whenever you want to put it out is the way to go.
Yeah. I just find it's how can I say, I want to put out a complete album of this ambient music, but I keep interrupting myself with inspirations of other songs, and I think I'm going to slip that one out as well. Yeah, I just can't stop. It's a bad habit, but
I understand that.
I think what it's like when you're working on your own, as we are, especially during this lockdown period, the last year or so. There are so many things we want to do. It's a good time to be a musician, because we're in the studio and that's where we want to be. As opposed to out there having fun. We're having fun here. But I think discipline is so important when it comes to
I agree.
Time management, discipline is so important. Otherwise, you're just going to end up sitting there twiddling your thumbs with a billion ideas and not knowing where to start.
Yeah, I mean, I think artists generally, we're absolutely brilliant at starting things, and we probably need a bit more work on finishing ththings. And I think everyone that I know, you get them sparked on an idea or whatever, and they're in there making it. But you regularly hear the hard part is finishing it off, and that is where the discipline comes.
Yeah.
And funny enough, what I'm doing right now, I'm actually, taking the best things that I did maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago, and actually going through that process of like, right, I've got to finish this stuff. Otherwise, I'm never going to do anything new. Because I've got this whole back catalogue of ideas that really, and I think if one is able to finish at least the bulk or the real key the key ideas, then that does free you up to like then, you know, sort of do more.
Yeah, it kind of closes one door in your mind and opens another one.
Exactly.
And you have to have those doors open and closed. So there's only one door open at the same time. Otherwise, if they're all open, you're going to be all over the place. You know,
can I ask, is this ambient project Harold Buddish as well, that you mentioned Parsons, and is it?
What it is, it's you'll have to have a listen.
I'd love to, because that is totally my thing.
Yeah,
I love that kind of
yeah,
stuff.
it's I've been getting very much into a lot of Brian Eno's material, and I love the way that he writes, where he never really repeats anything, and it's always
like jazz. Yeah.
Well, sort of, but
in concept, in
a silicon chip kind of way. You know, you're in this chip, in this mindset of in this weird room of just sounds, and it just takes you on a journey, and it's amazing. You can just have it on in the background, walk around the house, and you'll never get bored of it. It's always there. It's like the sound of nature, but electronic, and it's very inspiring. And I absolutely love writing that kind of material. And it's, for me, I get inspired by a lot of these sounds from these companies. So you hear a sound, you think, oh, that'll sound nice with a nice little chord there, a nice fifth, or a little high string right in the background, or some bells. And before you know it, you've got a little rhythm, a little arpeggiator, just undulating there with a nice drone underneath. You know, all that sort of stuff.
Beautiful.
Yeah. But yeah, it's something I really enjoy doing. But going back to your current project, when you when you finished this project, so to speak, even though you might not close the door on it completely, where is the future for you? What style is there any style that you want to approach, which you haven't approached yet?
Yeah, I mean, I have covered a lot of bases in my 20 plus career. You know, I've done a lot of those things that I mentioned to you. I've also done drum and bass, done ambient type stuff. I've worked on trailer music, you name it. And so, to be honest, my plan really is, I feel like I'm sort of, my ideal scenario is that I have built an audience that is considerable enough to earn purely a living from producing La Avenue. You know, I mean, if you could independently sell, you know, every quarter, for example, 5,000 vinyls, you know, few hundred cassettes, few thousand digital albums, T-shirts, blah, 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 etc., you can make a decent whack of money out of that, plus, you know, other things that you might have on the go. So my ideal scenario, you know, say in 2 years' time, would be to, you know, I've got a reasonable audience right now, but to, you know, expand that and move the project into more vocal orientated areas, because that a lot of the bigger artists in this genre, they are vocal, you know, and I am doing purely instrumental. So I almost look at like what I'm doing right now as sort of the early years of the project, you know.
Right.
I'm doing all the small clubs right now.
Talking of doing the small clubs, I mean, would you like to take it on the road?
You know, but it's you know, you haven't got all the other downsides of that, you know.
Yeah.
But I'm hoping that, you know, I'll get to a point where I build enough of an audience and I've built enough of a rapport through the quality of the music and the art that people, you know, because it's word of mouth a lot of the time as well, you know, and people just discover you left, right, and center. They heard this track, and you know how I'm speaking to you right now is because Lee Bennett heard a track on SoundCloud. He's mates with Ricky Wilde. He says to Ricky Wilde, "Here, Ricky, you've got to hear this." Ricky's getting in touch with me. "Hey, Jess, you know, blah blah blah. You've got to join this super group." Bosh, here we are. You know, and So eventually I'd like to get it to a point where, hopefully some of the more vocal orientated stuff will create even, larger ripples, if it were, and sort of take the project further from there. But yeah, within 5 years' time, I'm also, I mentioned to you in the supergroup, funny enough, that we're working on the beauty of this 80s thing. And like you mentioned with the clothes and everything, that is almost another angle to this whole project. And we are actually working on like a lot of these acts have their own t-shirts, hoodies, and all this kind of stuff, but we're actually going one step further in actually making like Avenue a bit of a brand, a bit, like some unique stuff, and it's going to be quality, and it's not going to be, cheap necessarily. It will be top dollar. And so the ideal scenario would be to doing the music, having the clothing, almost having an entire package. Similarly to you, I mean, you're not only doing your music, you're doing these video series with people. You've got all these other aspects to, these other strings to your bow, as it were.
Sure.
So I don't see me jumping off this project into something else, to be honest. I see this kind of going like that. That's how I want it to go, really. And like I said, the 80s thing is where it's at right now. It's sort of almost the nucleus, the catalyst of the project. But, it is morphing, I mean, even the Midnight, actually, they've kind of gone out from 1989 into 1991, 92. They literally have taken their sound into the 90s. I doubt they're going to move into the late 90s, into the 2000s. But it just goes to show that there is some fluidity within this sound spectrum, if you like. Yeah.
Yes, it's very interesting. I mean, there's so much good stuff out there now. I think it's a good time to be a musician. I really do. I thought there was a really bad patch, I think, where there was so much garbage coming out several years ago. It was just over commercialized. But now I think people are tired of all that, and they want to find new, fresh ideas, new sounds, and it really is an exciting time to create music, and long may it continue.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about you, but I think if we went back to say 1985, and we had a crystal ball and thought that by the 2020s, you'd be able to make your own music on a laptop computer, finalize it, and upload it to this thing called the internet, which everyone's connected to, and would buy it en masse, you'd be like, what are you talking about? That would be the total dream, And I think what is great is today is that independent musicians can literally go from, I mean, my son, 14, in the last 6 months, I mean, I bought him a laptop. He's had Cubase on there, but he's gone to this program called Fruity Loops.
Fruity Loops, yeah.
And he comes home from school, and he can't wait to come home from school because he's making his beats in his bedroom, and he's 14, and he understands YouTube. He knows that he can export a file, and he can upload that and he's got a little YouTube channel already. I think another 2 years of doing that, it's incredible what kids can do today.
Yeah, absolutely. All the technology is there. Yeah, it's just nurturing the talent, and
that is the thing. And I think that is part of the back in the day. We would have been in record shops flicking through vinyl, looking for stuff you've either heard or trying to find new stuff, and then you'd buy the odd thing, take it home, and be really surprised or go, oh shit, that was a waste of a $5. Yeah. I think today, you're searching around digitally to try and find new artists and new things. And I do find it interesting as well, is that in today's sort of music scene, it's sometimes just tracks that blow your mind, not necessarily everything else that the artist is doing. there's a really good house label called Anjuna Deep, and they do really very melodic, almost sort of deep, moody, atmospheric music, but with house beats.
Right.
And that label, they very rarely produce an album by a particular artist regularly, and they have these compilation albums which are all individual tracks, and you may only hear one artist track ever once, and they don't put anything else out by them, but that one track is just an incredible work of art, you know.
Right.
I think that is quite a difference to how things used to be back, you know, in the 80s and 90s, for example.
Well, it's been a fascinating hour or so.
Absolutely.
Thanks ever so much for coming along and talking about your musical past and future.
My absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me, Chris. It's always a joy to talk about these lovely subjects.
It is, and we could go on all night. Unfortunately, we haven't got all night. We've got a week, so just carry on.
That ends up being a very large file for YouTube. Yeah.
Oh yeah, well no, it's fine. We've got a good hour's worth of discussion
Absolutely.
here. So
thank you for having me, Chris. It's a really joy talking to you and finding another kindred spirit.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And tell the viewers where they can listen to your lovely music and follow you on this and that. And yes. I shall be putting the links down there. But just give us a quick shout as to where.
It's Avenue, Avenue, pure French. And
right.
So I'm on Bandcamp, I'm on SoundCloud, I'm on iTunes, I'm on Spotify. Just search Avenue.
Right. Well, as I said, all the links will be can be found where you can normally find the links on these videos. Everyone knows where to see the links down below. And I will just bring a little bit of 80s glamour here. Now, when I was on tour with the Flock of Seagulls back in 1986, we had 2 weeks off in West Hollywood. And I remember going...
That sounds dream.
Yeah, and that was the summer of 86. Well, spring of 86. And I went to Universal Studios. And this is the original that I brought back from Universal Studios. So I've had this ever since, from 1986.
Brilliant. That is brilliant.
Bought with the money that I earned by touring with a Flock of Seagulls. Yeah.
Absolutely brilliant.
So
Chris.
a bit of 80s paraphernalia here for you. The original.
I'm very jealous to have had 2 weeks off in West Hollywood in 1986. God, that must have been an amazing 2 weeks.
Yes, it was. And it was fantastic.
Yeah.
So what I'm going to say is thanks again, and that was the one fantastic take, and this is the end of that take. And when I hit this clapperboard down, it'll be the end of the interview. So thank you, and
cheers,
luckily we didn't need to use this. We only used it once. So all I say is thanks again, and we'll see you very, very soon. And keep writing that fantastic music, Jesse.
I will. Thank you.
Yeah.